We've been going down a path for the past 10 years where governments in Ottawa felt that they could just create money out of thin air. It's led to the inflation crisis. It has led to the decline in our standard of living. It's led to fleeing capital, and it's part of the reason why we had, at the beginning of this evening, somebody talking about the very serious danger that the federal government might become unviable. We have to get back to the idea that you have to create wealth before you can spend it.
Wayne, it's always good to talk to you. You and I have both been Freedom Train International ambassadors. That's how we got to know each other. But I always love to keep in touch with you about what's going on in Canada, for updates, for how you are going. And primarily in this talk, Wayne, I want people to go out of their way to follow you, because you've been shadow banned a lot in your country. And those who are most shadow banned are shadow banned because they are most over the target. They're most over the truth. So what I want to talk to you about today is an update on Canada, but first your hat. That's where we're going to begin. Now, I love the hat, and there is a practical reason for it, and there's a very aesthetic reason. Let's begin with the practicalities. Why have you decided to wear hats? Because this may help other people who are online a lot, Wayne.
Well, for me, I eat, sleep, and breathe my service. This is, if I had a church, this would be it. It'd be the church of truth, right? And so I spend anywhere from 14 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, basically in front of computers and bright lights. And it was getting to be very unbearable for me. It was hard to focus when I'd have headaches, and my eyes would just be burning up, halfway through a discussion. And so the hat kind of came by, something innocently. I made a trip very, very recently to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, which is kind of the site of one of the biggest battles of the Civil War. And I spent a day touring the battlefield and talking to some really, really old people that live to keep the memory of the history alive of it. And this hat turned out I had to come home with it from there, because there's an old artisan there that literally takes pictures from the Civil War battles and recreates the hats and the garb that they were actually wearing during the battles of Gettysburg. And this gentleman is right near the end of his days, and this will be one of the last hats that he made. And so I fell in love with the story and the history and the understanding. And to me, I've always been a huge history buff. I know that if we don't remember history, we're doomed to repeat it. And I came to realize how much of an imprint that Civil War made on the culture and the identity of America, that gives it a position that's unique in the world. And for the sentiment of that, led me to really want to honor that and to inspire that. And besides, if the cavalry ever does show up in Canada, I want them to know I'm a friendly. So it started out as sentimental, and it's really become something practical for me personally, that it allows me to just stay better on the top of my game at what I'm doing up here in Canada, or trying to do anyways up here in Canada.
And we're going to talk about that. What's Up Canada? I recommend everybody follow that on X, and we'll cover that more in a moment. But I also had a thought while you're talking, Wayne. I wonder if it would help counter the hideous digital ID game that the globalists are currently rolling out around the world. I wonder if wearing hats stops the facial recognition being so oppressive. Is there a way around all this digital ID oppression?
There's something that people are kind of missing about this. They still haven't got the ability through the digital avatar space to actually connect to the specific human, right? So quite literally, a nylon mask would change the outcome of what they're trying to do, or fake fingerprints, or so there's a lot of things. If you take a look at what some of the resistance in China does, they've developed mirrorized masks. There's all different kinds of ways and things, but At the end of the day, they're a long ways from actually being able to make it work. And in my opinion, this whole sudden drastic push for the digital ID is the deep state or whatever term you used for it. It's a desperate move to regain control of a situation that is getting very much out of hand for the globalist agenda.
I agree with you. It's them in a panic trying to say we still have control. We can make you feel scared. We can control whether you can have a life or not. That's what they're trying to say. Most of us are saying, I quoted it to Peter McIsaac, our other friend from Freedom Train International from Canada. I said the Australian vernacular is great. It's just bugger off, mate. Get lost. We're not going to follow the globalists. I mean, there is a time right now to say get lost to them. And Andrew Bridgen in the UK, the parliamentarian, said this is the hill to be willing to die on, the one where we say no to digital ID. Why, in your opinion, Wayne, is it so important that we say no to digital ID? And I ask you that as somebody researched, deeply knowledgeable across a wide range of areas. You've been doing this for how many years? You've been looking into the globalist plans.
I launched my platform early in 2019, and I've devoted, like, 365 a year to exposing this, and it's not that I want to tell people what they need to think. I want to give them information to think about so that they can find the clarity to make the right decisions and understanding what is truly going on. And this whole thing is a very deep, dark plan. And for the digital ID is one aspect of it. That's just one of the tools of it. It's a control tool, absolutely. And life as humans know it is going to be forever removed if we accept this and tolerate this. And it goes. People think of, ID as something you need if you're going to buy alcohol to prove your age. That's not what this is about. This is about literally controlling and tokenizing every molecule of the human existence. How many blades of grass you're allowed to have in your yard, how many nails you have in your fence. It is literally, at this point, they're tokenizing everything that humans, work around, use, live around, are necessary for their survival, and they're adding a value to it, a token to it, and it's very much like, I used to chuckle. My sister used to play these farming games on Facebook and other places, and they would buy tokens so that they could improve their farms and stuff like that. So they were literally trading real world cash for these digital tokens that would allow them to do stuff in the Avatar universe. That's what this digital ID is the reverse of that. This is going to be impacting every metric of our reality, and that will decide what you're allowed or not allowed to do. And the enforcement part of it is, it's beyond evil, and it's unlimited, right? And it's all entirely arbitrary as to, what you're going to be allowed to do, or whether you have enough tokens to do it or social credit points to do it. So this is going to contain all of your digital records, every bit of metadata that you've ever created and generated, and it's going to put it all into one point of control. And we have no guarantees who's going to have access to that one point of control.
Yes. Absolutely. It's so dependent on people who are in charge, inverted commas, being honest. And they've shown us in the COVID years how deeply dishonest they are, that they are, in fact, a criminal cabal. And now they're saying, give us all your life's information, all your bank records, all of your records for the ownership of your house, of the ownership of your car. Let's go through a day. So say they do this, or let's take China, where they have done it. So you get up in the morning, and you might want to have 2 eggs for breakfast, but you might have to go down to the shop and buy those 2 eggs. And you put in your digital ID, and the machine says what? You've already bought 4 eggs this week. You're not allowed anymore until next week. Are we talking that kind of dystopia, Wayne?
Even more so, where if you didn't open the door for the person that was coming through on the other side, you weren't polite enough. So you've had points docked because you weren't civil enough in society. You didn't behave to the standard. It's little things like that.
Wait a
Even
minute,
that
just take people
will
through that, Wayne. How do they know? How do they know? Because your fingerprint is on the door, or it's just cameras following you everywhere?
cameras are watching the doors.
My
The,
God.
the biometric systems, and this was something I saw starting to happen here in Canada during COVID already. At the entrances to grocery stores, we were seeing biometric surveillance systems being put in at the entrance, not the exit, at the entrance to the stores, right? It's not about shoplifting or crime, or these things would be at the exit, people going out the door. No, they want to know every biometrical detail about people going into the store. And we're starting to see where stores, or the major chains and block and box stores, are adopting real-time pricing based on supply and demand. And so if the camera is watching you go around the store and you've had your 4 eggs for the week already, by the time you get to the egg shelf, that box of eggs might show for you 10 times the price because you've used up your allotment for eggs, right? So it's literally did real-time tracking and judgment on your behavior in every aspect of your life.
This issue to do with the technology and the digital infrastructure, I just want to emphasize how important I think that is. Because in the end, you need the data. You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be there'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure. And many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
It's revolting. And we already know people like Bill Gates have been pushing his Frankenfood, his lab-made fake food that has no nutrition whatsoever, but is made from things like crickets, which if humans were evolved to eat crickets, we would have been eating crickets by now. We can't have it forced on us by the World Economic Forum. But if we want a lovely piece of red meat versus the Frankenfood, fake meat, they can direct us to the fake meat and stop us from buying a real piece of meat. That sort of control, that minutiae of control can come in with digital ID. I don't think people have any idea how bad digital ID can be.
They really genuinely don't. And we saw that here just before Trudeau stepped down. One of the bills that had made it to the Senate was literally a tokenization bill to attach that token to every blade of grass, every rabbit that you have, every chicken, every egg that it lays. Literally that's coming through. But it was also attached with an enforcement agency bill. So they were literally planning to pass hundreds of millions of dollars to establish enforcement agencies to enforce compliance to this tokenization system. And when you mention crickets, I used to sell these T-shirts that said "Save a cricket, eat a steak," because here in Canada we have the world's largest cricket factory here in Canada to be used for protein consumption as alternative. And this is one of the things that was implemented in that bill. Yeah, that Canada has claimed that the world's largest chicken factory, and we used to have
cricket factory, not chicken. Cricket factory.
yeah,
Wow.
crickets. We used to have the world's best beef, but now it has become so out of price. The last time I bought an individual size sirloin steak, which is not a fancy cut, was $30, right? So it's, beef is rich man's food already here in Canada. And in one province alone, to set an example for that, Ontario, our largest province, we have more than 4 million Canadians accessing the food banks right now. And we know that these are traditional Canadians, not import Canadians, because the import Canadians are all getting $82,000 plus per year, so they can afford to eat. They're not accessing the food banks. So we know that this is traditional Canadians that are already starving.
Absolutely heartbreaking when you think about it. Let's keep going with their agenda, though, and looking at cars. How will it affect our cars? I want people to really think from this conversation why digital ID, saying no to it, is the hill that it's worth dying on. So let's have a look at cars. How would they control our vehicles and our use of vehicles and transport generally through digital ID, Wayne?
The car locks you up and takes you where it's told to take you. If you suffer from road rage and you cuss the government while you're driving the car, there is nothing stopping the car from taking control of you and taking you to the nearest police station.
That's
And
that's where
now,
electric cars could lead. That's where they could lead.
absolutely. Absolutely. In Canada, that's one of the things Canadians are pushing back on to a certain extent, because it's just, I mean, we live in the second harshest climate on the planet, the other one being Russia, because we are both northern territories, right? So these are just absolutely not practical. So Canadians are pushing back on the EV car market thing pretty strongly right now, but it has nothing to do, the pushback has nothing to do with the capabilities of the car. It's only about the impracticality of it. So this is really disturbing. That people aren't seeing the connections between what's on the just literally on the other side of accepting these kinds of things. But here in Canada, and I think that this is kind of parallel in all of the Commonwealth, historically Commonwealth countries. We're all on the same trajectory. We all of our governments have been captured. They are nothing more than middle management teams for hostile foreign ideologies and think tanks, and later on we can dig onto who pulls the strings behind the people pulling the strings. But we're all kind of to varying degrees on the same path, the same trajectory of being forced into this matrix of digital control. And a lot of this has been led to us through our normalization of free apps, for example. And a simple analogy to make for that, two actually, if it's free, you are the product. It's as simple as that. If it's free, you are the product, and they are tracking every time you use that free app or tool. But here, I grew up using road maps. I don't know any other adults that are still capable or even possess a paper roadmap. They're 100% dependent on Google Maps or one of these mapping tools, right? So, I mean, good luck trying to get away from that if you don't want anybody to know where you're going. Sorry, you're absolutely being tracked.
And it is worth buying any roadmaps for your city or your country, even if you want to just store those away, because you can see very quickly how frightening it would be for people to suddenly have the whole internet go down. And that would be a way to shake people up. That may very well be something they try, a little bit like, the first time Ardern came out with, we've got a serious pandemic across the world in New Zealand. I even took her seriously. I even believed it. I thought, well, it must be really bad. People must be starting in the next week or so to be dying in the streets. I wish I had gone at that point to the Auckland hospital and just sat outside the ambulance bay, because ambulance officers who were in that hospital said they were sitting around inside for weeks playing cards, embarrassed when they went to the shops and people clapped them, not knowing whether to say it's all a fraud. It's like the emperor's new clothes. It's a total con. There's nobody who's sick. We only got sick in New Zealand when she rolled out the jabs. So it's the same thing. They could bring down the internet, make us scared just for a few days. We don't have access to roadmaps. We don't have access to banks. We don't have access to the things of our lives, to each other as well. But it will pass. They'll bring it back up if we can just hold the line. They love to make us scared, don't they, Wayne?
They may bring it back on, but there's no guaranteeing that you'll be allowed access to it, right? If here in Canada, it's almost impossible to find a paper map. People are going to be dependent on these systems. And it was, I believe, early in 2019, 2020 is when it would have been when Klaus Schwab announced the next pandemic would be hackers on energy systems and energy structures, right? So here in Canada, they've got, that, and it's, I want to come back to that because it's the crisis that they create. Here in Canada, they're looking at universal basic income for everybody, and we're already very few people carry cash. So when the power goes down, if you don't have cash, you're pretty much hooped. You're going to be looking at your country turning into Venezuela in a couple of days, but then they bring it back on for the essential services and the approved individuals, those that have accepted their digital IDs. Was it Vietnam where 85,000 bank accounts were canceled because they didn't catch up with their biometrics and digital ID programs? So it's going to be one, mini crisis after another as they shepherd and herd us into compliance in these, in what I call the avatar universe.
It's shocking. It is literally hurting. Hurting is the word. We've got to think of ourselves now. Well, the way they see us is this, like sheep. Like sheep being rounded up, and the banks are often the dogs yapping at our ankles, saying, if you want to have right over your own money. I mean, let's deal with some answers along this, so it's not all depressing news all the way. There are many things people can do. One of the answers is look at gold and look at silver right now, Wayne. It is starting to nudge 50, and it's really going to going up, I think, even $1 a day soon. It's really catching up. It's been kept falsely low for so long, and it's starting to catch up to its big brother gold, which is also going crazy. So getting in gold and silver, get your money out of the bank as much as you can right now. Do you agree with that? We're not giving financial advice, by the way. It's just, it's just a practical step.
I'm an uneducated northern swamp donkey, so I am not capable of giving financial advice, but I will tell people what I've discovered, what I read, and what I know. I'm very fortunate in the fact that every Friday I have a precious metals expert on my program. So we've been tracking a lot of this stuff over the last year. And just today, I read this morning that they're expecting silver to be worth 100 times the price of gold in coming days. And a lot of that has to do with people don't realize the scale of industrial consumption of silver that will never come back into the marketplace. For example, in each missile, there's something like 13 kilograms of silver that goes into every single intercontinental, even mid-range missiles. So when we've got this international arms race and everybody is, building missiles, it comes back to, it's funny because one of the quotes from a fellow named Andrew Slay over at Sprott Me, who suggests that gold is for wealth preservation and silver is for self-preservation. Well, we're seeing the governments take and adopt that same principle because we're seeing this global shift away from the U.S. reserve dollar. That is going to be, it's being replaced subtly a gold reserve, not a BRICS currency reserve or the U.S. dollar reserve, but literally a gold reserve. So nations are fortifying themselves with wealth preservation in gold, but buying up all of the silver that they can because that's what they make their bullet out of now.
It's fascinating, Silver. The story of Silver is wonderful. And your fellow that you mentioned is somebody I particularly like and have come to trust very much. Could you tell us a little bit about your Friday show and who you deal with there, because they're honourable?
So Bryce Wade is who I call him my precious metals guru. he's somebody that's very aware of what's been coming, and it's interesting because one of the things that we fail at very horribly on our show is referring people back to his company, New World Precious Metals, because we're more focused on people looking after themselves than actually solving silver, right? And Bryce will be the first one that says, I don't care where you get it from, look after yourself, right?
Yes.
And that's, we are, polar opposites in some capacities, right? Like I'm a Christian with conviction. He's agnostic, but he appreciates and understands the value of living in a society like we have, thanks to Christianity. But for us, what we do in our show is it's literally it's about understanding the principle that localism is the only 100% safe and effective cure for globalism, because these people that prep think, from the lone wolf perspective. Guess what? You don't make it in as a lone wolf in the times that are coming. Drone and technology warfare will eliminate that. We have to fortify our communities. We're only as strong as the weakest person within our communities, not as individuals. And that's, I'm not saying, to create this hippie commune kind of thing or go and tell everybody what you've done to prep. No, I'm not saying that. I look at things from another friend of mine's perspective Tom Marazza, who wrote the book, The People's Emergency Plan, which I rave about continuously. I spent 15 years in emergency services, in fire and rescue, and people are so ill prepared for even a short period of time. And that's where strengthening and fortifying our communities is so paramount and key. Finding out you don't have to have the answers or have everything, but know what your community has an abundance of, what it has a shortfall of, and what options you have for that. Be it medicine, food supplies, water, all of the things that life revolves around. Because at some point, this second Tower of Babel will collapse. And the dependency that they intend to create is what they intend to leverage against us. When the tower collapses, they're going to say, dangle these carrots. We will allow you access to the food store if you accept the digital ID and help us rebuild the new system how we see it to make it work. And our hope for survival lies in the fact of saying peacefully, yeah, no, don't need you, don't want you, can't afford you, we're not interested. And for every day that our communities can resist the temptation of submitting to that, makes it exponentially more difficult for them to keep the demon dragon alive. It is a voracious beast. It needs constant replenishment and financing and currency, because that is what they depend on, be it social currency or hierarchical currency. Every communist wants to serve Marx the best, but at the end of the day, they are all useful idiots, right? And that's what we have to resist.
They are useful idiots. It's interesting, your sound is being a bit gabbled at sometimes, and I think it is because they try to interfere with your signal because, again, you are such a threat to them because you tell the truth. So when we're telling, that's all a compliment to you, but when we're talking about they and the globalists and who they are, we will get behind the curtain in a moment. Let's look at their goals. They literally, you mentioned UBIs, they literally want to bring humanity, particularly in the West, onto our knees. They want us to be hungry, want us to be cold because we can't heat our homes. They want us to have no way to escape their smart cities. S is about surveillance. M is monitoring. They want us to be desperate, and they want us to say, we will accept whatever scraps you're willing to give us. And they'll give us a pathetic UBI. They'll try to turn the world into a miserable sort of ghetto. If you want to see it, have a look at Ready Player One, the Spielberg movie, where he lives in a miserable, filthy city, and his only escape is into the virtual reality eye set. And this, they signal it ahead of time, don't they? They are wanting us to go there, but they need one thing from us. And if millions of us won't give it, they're in trouble. And that is, they need us at some point to say, yes, we'll go along with your plans. If we say no, I don't think, as demonic as they are allowed to go on pushing it. They need at some point our assent, don't they?
You know, there's nothing that the left does better, and I use that term loosely because it's really not the left. It's the left are you know, the clone troopers, the Autobots, automatons, the non-player characters that, you know, are disposable,
They're brainwashed. They're
and
brainwashed.
they brainwashed, programmed, misinformed, you know, all of the things that it was manufactured, you know, over decades and generations. Yuri Bezmenov detailed it, you know, broke it down into how long it would take them to implement it and how long it takes to get out of it, and those kinds of things. It's literally, it's not left versus right. It is top versus bottom, and this comes back to the useless eater class. There is nothing more than that, you know, people like you know, Noah Yuval Harari and the Club of Rome. There is nothing that they would like better than to have us completely have all of the worker bees that provide all of the luxuries of life replaced by artificial intelligence, and then nuke the rest of the problem children in humanity to back to a you know, a more manageable level. At that point, you know, it's like the Matrix. That's the shift from Ready Player One to being, you know, in the Matrix. And you know, that movie Ready Player One, that's not that fantastically far in the future. That's 2030, right? That's if you look at the culmination of the goals and the agenda that they have set out for 2030, that's what life can reasonably be expected to be, if not worse, in just a few short years. Because we have to remember that technology quantifies, it accelerates nonstop, right? Somebody in the tech development sector, if they take a week off from their job, they don't know enough to do their job when they come back to their job. That's how fast technology is advancing, right?
Wow.
And so the left is really good at eating itself, right?
What do you mean by
they
that?
really are.
Explain that, Wayne.
They're, you know, they are so hive programmed, they will, anybody that, you know, even dares to question, will this work within their hive, is immediately cut from the hive.
Mm.
Right, and then they're ostracized, destroyed, and eliminated just for questioning. You know, will this even work? A great example of that. Try giving, you know, the little mustache guy in Germany bad news towards the end of the war, or the Emperor of Japan bad news before the end of the war. You didn't escape the building with your head, right? That is literally the left eating the left when I refer to that. And it's not an appropriate term because, you know, that's the illusion of it. Their control has been maintained through this left-right dichotomy for
Yes.
decades and generations. And at this point, they manipulate all of that through mass, you know, programming. The internet has been the greatest weapon to Satan in the history of, you know, good versus evil. So there's so much of that has us playing against each other, left versus right, left versus right, left right, and that's that vote harder baby thing. That's, you know, never changes anything, but we'll get it next time, right? That's literally us playing the game to keep us occupied instead of being focused on who our legitimate and real enemies are, and those are the people behind the curtains that manifest or manufacture not just the crises, but the ideological stuff that forces the crises, right? And so then it becomes a never-ending loop of, some people call it the Hegelian dialect, but here in Canada, the government recognizes it under a paper called PAR, Participatory Action Research, which is problem, reaction, solution. And that is a government policy here in Canada, how they monitor and track so that they know what to do next.
That is extraordinary. And that's a real part of the communist Marxist playbook. Make sure the people are fighting each other and never looking at the march of communist, fascist ideology into power. And I find that really interesting. You talk about, let's throw out the left and right dichotomy altogether. There was a post this morning I noted on X saying, far right, which is what I am, is what used to just be normal. And it puts it really well. I mean, you think about where we've both come from, Wayne. You're a real humanitarian. You care about people enormously, to the point where, as you said at the beginning, you've sacrificed 5 years and longer to help wake people up, to help make people aware. Let's call it that. And you think about where we've come from. I mean, with me, I used to support Bernie Sanders, because I thought he was a humanitarian. I celebrated Barack Obama, one of the most evil leaders ever to occupy the Oval Office, and that's saying something. I celebrated. I got my young children in front of TV the day he was inaugurated. I said, this could be a new John F. Kennedy. This could be a new era. This could be a new Camelot. Of course, we were totally lied to, and many of us have had to wake up out of that stupor where we thought we were being humanitarian. We thought we were making a better world. In fact, we were just being manipulated, lied to, connived, and controlled. And that's a hard awakening for people. How is that awakening going in Canada? How many Canadians do you think are aware?
It's really difficult to gauge, even myself. I've learned to never to come to any conclusions and always leave a door open for possibilities. In There was a time, I describe it on a stream here, not X space here last week or something. You know, in my teens and early adult life, I probably would have been fallen under the classic liberal, camp, and then I started to see that there was definitely some issues there. So even though I didn't move, the liberals started to move further and further left, and so then I found myself surrounded by conservatives, kind of going, okay, yeah, well, it kind of makes a little bit more sense to me. It's a little bit more of an adult in the room thing, but I've never changed. But the entire political spectrum have skewed so far to the left that it's, I coined this term a long time ago, that insanity is unsustainable and there is going to be a correction. It's inevitable. The pendulum will swing. And for years, I've been nervous about what does that look like when the pendulum swings back, because the left got so far out there that there is no such thing as center or right anymore. There is only the left and the far right. And, they've basically opened season on the far right, and there's nothing in between. Just an example where if you don't support Palestine, you're automatically a Nazi now. It doesn't matter, anything in between doesn't exist to them, and you are, you are open season to those guys, right? So it's really an extreme that has become lethal, and over, as far as for the awakening, I think that we're at a point here now, and it can be framed in a political perspective as well, if people, if it helps them make more sense out of it. But um, our conservative party in Canada should, by all intents and purposes, be obliterating the Liberal Party out of government. But it can no longer happen anymore because the entire traditional conservative base has become so awake, they don't vote anymore because they realize there is nothing more than a red taxi and a blue taxi taking us to the same damn hell, right? It's literally gotten like that. So
That's the
I don't
same in
believe
New
it,
Zealand. It's the same in New
right?
Zealand. Yep.
Yeah, and there is no alternative, right? There is nobody that speaks to reason or the truth. They are now gotten to the point, you'll probably find the similarities there here too, where our quote unquote conservative politicians, they no longer listen to the traditional natural Canadians, because they know that we know that they know that they're all full of pucky and it's a joke, it's pandering. So now even the conservatives are out there pandering to every form of jihad and minority and ethnic and minority group in the victimhood Olympics that's out there, that they don't even care whether the natural citizens vote for them or not. So they continue to fight not for the vote of the natural Canadians, but with the replacement population. And Canada, the numbers are way further down that road than people might think.
Well, I'd like to talk numbers. I just want New Zealanders listening to this to really take note of what Wayne's just said, because now our conservative, supposedly conservative globalist leader, Christopher Luxon, who's just putting in the same policies as Ardern, has gone to India and has basically said, hey, India, open slather, come to New Zealand. Tiny country, tiny infrastructure compared with the numbers who'll come, overcrowded roads, hospitals where there's a 12-hour waiting list in the emergency department many nights. Schools can't cope, but come on in, because they know they're going to vote for Christopher Luxon, he thinks, at the next election. So he's bringing thousands and thousands of migrants. Does that sound eerily familiar to Canada as well?
We've got 15 million new Canadians that don't have roots here. 15 million. And
Wow.
we got almost a million in the first quarter of this year, and there is no slowing down on that. While our senior and natural population is being departed of. Canada's third leading cause of death is state-sanctioned murder by people that are, they're victims of our country and the politics within it. People have gotten so far down in poverty. Like you said, the 4 million in one province out of the 45 million that are here now. 4 million in one province are using food banks, and like I said, that's not the new population. They're 100% being fed and fattened up on the public dollar. So the politicians, they're not going to go and campaign in a seniors home of natural Canadians, because there is no future vote there even at this point. And there's, I believe, somewhere in the tune of 14.7 million Canadians that have been marked under the category as to be mated over the coming number of years in Canada. So they're literally using murder to balance the budgets of our country here in Canada.
And we don't have it called MAID here, but we have it. Huge campaign again under Jacinda Ardern, who, when she was pregnant with her baby, introduced full-term abortion. And then the other end of life, she introduced the ability to nominate that you will basically suicide with a state sanction and state help. Over in Canada, you call it MAID, don't you? And it's had unnervingly vast uptake, I believe.
It's the third leading cause of death in our country right now. It is now a norm and acceptable, where they have organizations that specialize in creating end of life parties, they call them, so that you can go out on a celebration. They're selling this to seniors after having isolated them, stripped them of their dignity and their humanity. to the point where the only way out is by your hand or the government's, to terminate life. And this is, like a budget matter for our government. This is, on the other side of that, in North America, we have executed, and I'll use that word, we have executed more unborn children than people were lost in all of the world wars combined. So this excuse of declining population is another one of their made up crises.
Wayne, that is horrific. That many abortions in Canada.
Yeah.
It
In
is,
Canada
it
and the
is,
U.S.
it is
combined.
murder.
This is Canada and the U.S. combined. This is North American wide, but this is that terminology that they use. They're probably using it there. Declining birth rates. We need more migration. Well, yeah, no duh. We're killing all of our future.
That is incredible, let alone the suffering. These tiny babies in utero are tiny human beings who are fully sentient. And I'll tell you how I know that. This is an extraordinary little, sometimes you get a little window of understanding. I've got a little granddaughter of under 1, and she was crying quite a lot. She had a lot of, nasal blockages, couldn't breathe very well. Now, somebody who'd worked in hospitals showed me you just take the baby, you hold the baby underneath the nappy and one around the front. So the baby's very secure, and you just rock them in a kind of figure 8 like this. You just do that. And the crying every time would stop immediately. And I said to this person who'd worked in the hospital and who knew it from being around babies for years, why do you think that works so effectively? She said, it's because the baby, when it's born, has a memory of being in utero, floating in the mother's beautiful fluid sac inside and being happy and being calm. So doing that figure 8 rocking of the baby with it being held securely takes it back to being in utero, where it was fully sentient, where it was a fully sentient human being with awareness, with memory, with feelings that we have once we're out of the uterus and we're born into this world. It still has those memories in there. These are beings that are being murdered, and that is what abortion is. And I was brought up to be very liberal, to be very, women's work must come first, and everyone's equal, and mothering isn't as valuable. I think mothering is the most valuable role now, and I think the honor it is when you have a baby. If you don't want to have a baby, refrain from having a sexual relationship until you're willing to take the consequences if that would happen. That is how far I've gone now, because it is so sacred to become pregnant. And you shouldn't muck around with that unless you're really willing to take the consequences, because that is a human being. Now, we've been told the exact opposite of that kind of thing, and it's all part of the degradation of honoring of human beings. They're trying to say my life and your life and a baby's life and an old person's life has no real value. That's the message of the globalists, isn't it?
It really is, and coming back to the children and the abortion rates, um, you know, without even looking at at the numbers, if you look at what has been normalized in our society here, they don't even take birth control anymore because abortion is just as easy. So it's
No.
become the date solution to the nihilistic self-destruction of our society, right? And it is the number one target of the medical system. The complications with infancy and pregnancies due to the COVID experimentation on innocent societies. All of this is, different edges on the war against, you know, it's. I've come to realize it's not even just the war against the West. It's far more sinister than that, even.
Okay, Wayne, let's go there. Let's talk about who the heck is behind all this, and what is it, in your view, that they really want?
We have such an escalation at this point right now of rage baiting. Doesn't matter what social media or media platform you are on, there is a rage cult out there that is competing in the Rage Olympics to distract us from the war that is being waged against Christianity. That's, to me, is where I've come to realize the United Nations is, I referred to our governments earlier as middle management. Well, that's who they're middle management for, is these self-anointed supranational entities and think tanks at the United Nations, through money and profits and supporting agencies, NGOs, nonprofits, charities, those kinds of things. But what most people don't realize is the collusion and who pulls the strings behind that green curtain called the United Nations is an organization called the OIC. You're going to become the most censored person in New Zealand after this, Liz, because it was uncovering all of this that made me the most censored person in Canada. But I cannot tell a lie, because this is the reality of it. And so the OIC, which provides the majority of the funding for all of the cultural revolutions and all of the organizations and entities behind the United Nations. The OIC is the Organization of Islamic Coalition, which is the largest voting bloc in the United Nations. This is how these radical Islamic entities become the heads of this department or that department within the United Nations. How does Tedrosi get to be the head of the WHO? Because the OIC put him there.
Wow. We had a former New Zealand Prime Minister, Helen Clark. She just won't go away and retire and stay silent. She definitely mentored Jacinda Ardern. She loathed Christianity. When she was Prime Minister, she got it out of everything she could as fast as she could, and made it something to be sneered at in New Zealand, made having a faith something in God to be sneered at in New Zealand. She almost clawed her way to the top of the United Nations. So somebody like that would be right in with them. If you want to get power, you've got to be in with them. Is that right?
The
The
United
OIC.
Nations is the United Nations is the bought and paid for broom of the hostile radical Islamic State. Right here in Canada, right now we have the entire world focused on a dozen other wedge issues, and not one single politician will address the fact that 593 Christian churches have been burned down in Canada. We have new laws coming into play here where it is against the law to speak ill of the Jewish, the Islamists, and we are no longer allowed to deny the residential grave story with the natives. So we are having, and Justin Trudeau, this was a complete setup, and I want to touch on this for a little bit, and this is something I'm truly an expert on. The manufactured communism and Marxism within Canada, leveraging the native population, the Indian population, the natural Indian population. A story came out about 4 years ago from two former Huffington Post journalists that they had discovered 215 marked Indian graves at a residential school. Since that time, they have destroyed our country over land acknowledgements. This is where they come from. The land acknowledgements, it comes from orienting from this same wedge issue manufactured by these guys and implemented, so that when they started burning down Christian churches here in Canada, our Prime Minister said, well, it's an understandable response for what's been done to them. So this is, just such an escalation, and not just the acceptance, but the tolerance of the war on Christianity, where to the point where I get abused regularly from people that are supposedly on my side of the political spectrum, but it's open season on Christianity and expressing your beliefs here in Canada, and you will go to jail if you disparage, the jihadis, or talk negatively about the protected classes. So with the censorship bills that are on the table here right now under this Mark Carney regime, I'm literally looking at life in prison in Canada if they're passed, just for the work that I've done. And this goes to the level of desperation, and I'll wear this proudly. In 2020, some people may not know, we have our national broadcaster, the CBC, similar to the BBC in England, 100% government funded. I'm just one guy with a computer and some screens and an attitude that says I will not comply. In 2020, 2021, I was reaching two-thirds of the number of people that our state broadcaster was, and they crushed my platforms. I am persona non grata on YouTube. I will never have a YouTube channel again. I am not allowed. They make it incredibly, if anybody tunes into my programs on any of the social media platforms, there's a high degree of likelihood that you may have to try and enter my show up to 8 or 9 or 10 times, because they know that people will give up before they actually get into the program. If you try to share my program across the media platforms, you will receive a suspension for trying to share my programs.
You are
This is the
joking.
life. No, this is life as an independent alternative voice here in Canada right
But
now.
that was happening at the height of the madness of the pandemic. But you're saying that is still going on for your
Absolutely.
material. What about if
Yes, absolutely.
what about if people clip parts of your interviews and then put them up under their own name? Does that work better?
That varies slightly from platform to platform. But for Facebook, for example, you're probably not going to get suspended, but you'll probably be here in Canada, anyways. If you're trying to share it from here in Canada, you'll be told no, you can't do that.
I loathe Facebook, but everybody from Tucker Carlson on praises X because honestly, Elon Musk has given us a marketplace. How safe are you on X, Wayne?
I am extremely de-throttled on Facebook. See, here's the thing. America believes in freedom of speech, but they control freedom of reach.
Who controls that?
The platforms do, and all of the platforms live in Silicon Valley. So if you're an American, you will get clear sailing on whatever you do within America. A friend of mine up here, a country singer, released a song, and X wouldn't allow it to be distributed in Canada because our government says so, for example. That is just a song. Right? Even just a song is the government of Canada controls X as to what is accessible here in Canada. So,
Yes, I've
yeah,
thought that for
if
a
you're,
long time. Yes, definitely. Even on Rumble, there's limited reach. There's shadow banning, and I'm sure it's coming from the New Zealand government. So for Free NZ on Rumble, our reach has very much cut down. So it's the local governments who dictate to the Silicon Valley operatives in our country, this person will be shadow banned, or in your case, really heavily still censored. And it's always that for me points to, oh, here's a truth teller. If they really don't want me to listen to Wayne, I've got to find a way to listen to Wayne, because he's clearly the one they're going after, because he's clearly got the truths that they most want to hide. So how can people follow you? Let's deal with that now. How can they really support and financially support you for the brilliant work you do? What, 5 nights a week, Wayne, for years?
it hasn't always been that way, but the last year and a half, it's been 5 nights a week at a minimum. I stream at 7 p.m. Eastern time here in Canada. It's interesting because tracking the metrics, and I can be found primarily on my website, which is whatsupcanada.org, not .ca or .com, but .org. And that's been the site that I've been able to keep the longest. Interesting side note on that. I used to build my websites on GoDaddy until the government came calling, and GoDaddy said, "Yeah, here you go," and they wiped away not just all of my sites, but the sites that I had built for other people as well, for completely, different things. But yeah, so the governments have incredible influence over that. So I built this last site, which I've had hacker issues or attempts, but having built that one in Switzerland, in the shadow of the beach, where there are the Switzerland will not allow anybody to go looking at anybody's anything in Switzerland. So I've been able to keep my platform up and alive there. I stream regularly on X and Rumble, as well as one US platform that is a true patriot called Wimkin, WIMKIN, which stands for The World Must Know, World Information Network. So a really cool thing there, but mostly that's where my content lives. I do have the capacity. I stream live on my own website, and I built my own chat room in there that is outside of Big Brother's control as well. So this is a part that they haven't figured out yet. Every time they hit me, I get up and I spit my chiclets out and I smile at them and I say, "You hit like a girl. You just make me better and tougher and stronger and harder to silence." Right? It's that indomitable Canadian spirit. I've got it in spades. I will not. Part of that comes from I spent a bunch of years working with world champion combat athletes, like Muay Thai and kickboxing and that kind of thing. And I learned the difference that, a world champion is not necessarily a world champion because they've got talent or skill. It's because world champions get up even when they can't. Right.
That's
And
beautiful.
so I try to remember that when they make it hard for me, and they do everything they can to make it hard for me, but I keep going anyways. But Substack I've found to be pretty good as well. So I publish everything that when I do a show, Monday to Friday. It's like a box of chocolates. You're never going to know what you're going to get, because for me, it's all piecing together and making sense out of things. Right? Clarity is going to be a superpower moving forward because they want us completely disoriented, running around like the deer in the headlights. And so, context, in depth. Clarity. That's what I'm looking for in my programs, and I provide all the receipts on Substack all the time. None of my work will ever be behind a paywall, but people can choose to voluntarily subscribe on Substack. It's like $8 a month or something. I want to keep it affordable, but a number of years ago when I was, the number one watched platform in Canada during the height of COVID, because I dared to interview 50 of the world's top immunologists and doctors. And at that time, I was the only one in the digital space doing it literally. Guests would be on Tucker Carlson's show when he was still on Fox on Wednesday night, and they'd be on my show on Thursday night because there just was nowhere else for them to go, right? So that was kind of what really crushed me. And I was speaking at a live event in the middle of a horrendous snowstorm, and there was a little old couple that showed up there. There was only like 12 people in the room because it was like, even by Canadian standards, it was a doozy of a snowstorm. But they weren't really engaged. They weren't really there for the presentation and those kinds of things. And they waited to almost the last people to speak to me. And they told me then at that point that the only reason that they were there, and they had driven an hour and a half each way to get there, was to tell me that one of the shows that I had done had saved their lives by the information that they had received.
Oh,
And that
Wayne, you mean at the
fundamentally,
at the height of the COVID
yeah,
nightmare?
yeah,
So what
that
did they mean? What did
fundamentally,
they mean by that? That they hadn't taken the poison because of that?
they hadn't they had been dealing with a cold, and they had, at their age, they were torn between following the doctor's advice or not, and they hadn't, and they had both come through with flying colors while their neighbors were dropping around them. And, for them to drive through those kinds of horrible conditions to tell me that fundamentally changed me. And that was where I decided at that point, no matter what work I ever do, I will never force anybody to pay for it, because I just don't know what program I'm going to do ever that's going to give people that aha moment or that bit of information that's going to, have the give them the opportunity to make a clearer decision. So that's what drives me.
Wayne, that is fantastic. I work on that too. There's a wonderful Ralph Waldo Emerson poem, and one of the lines is to know that one life has breathed easier because you have lived. And then the last line of the poem, it's got a whole lot of ways in which you can make life better. But the last line is, this is success. This is success. And that is success for me. If because of our work, one life is saved, or one life is happier, or one life breathes easier. And given how important your work is and how dedicated you are, I ask people to sign up to your Substack. What is that? What's the Substack address?
Whatsupcanada.substack.com.
Great.
You can
Great.
some of the platforms they wouldn't let me, or because I've lost or been booted off of them before. It used to be brand, the same What's Up Canada across everywhere, but I can't get some of them back. So in some places on X, I think it's What's Up Canadian. But you'll find me at some point if you're looking for me. But whatsupcanada.substack.com is probably the most reliable place if I was going to get people. And you can find it if you go to my website. If that's too much to remember, right front and center on my website, you'll see a button that says subscribe to Substack. But that's for people to get the most out of it, that's where I would encourage them to go. My shows aren't live streamed on Substack, but they're typically up by the next morning. But the reason I send people there, if you want community, catch me on a live stream. We have got some of the most beautiful community out there. And I say I have community, not an audience, because when something comes up and there is an option to do something, I never have to tell my viewers to go and do the thing. They just go and do the thing, and they look after each other. And I see endless cases of them helping each other within the chat without me even ever having to suggest or say a thing. But the Substack is where all of the receipts are, all of the information, and those are weapons that people can fill their quivers with little arrows of information. People don't have to take my word for it. I'll show them where to find the words that they need and the information that they need. So Substack is an absolute gold mine if you want the stuff that they don't want anybody in Canada to know.
And if people sign up for a year and renew it after a year, it keeps people like you going, Wayne. Those little quivers of information, full of information that will go into people's minds and be able to be used. That's such a beautiful metaphor. I want to give a quick shout out too to Chris Pavlovsky of Rumble. He was extraordinary when this new government came in towards Free NZ Media here, Wayne. He went public without telling us at all. One night he just went public with an interview saying, I've been called by the government, somebody from the government in New Zealand, Chris Luxon's new government, saying take down Free NZ Media altogether. And he said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because that's against free speech. And that was the head of Rumble. So I am forever very, very loyal to Rumble. I'm grateful to X. And yeah, I think Substack is good. But please, would Chris Pavlovsky and Elon Musk defend free speech against these governments? Because it's the governments.
I got one big beef with Rumble. For the most part, I would agree with you, but they have removed one of my videos as well.
Really?
Because it was Yeah, and I've never dared to put that one back up again. To me, the fact that they removed that one and the contents was literally the most incriminating evidence possible, imaginable, against the Teamsters Union of the United States. That I think if I felt at the time, I mean, I'm just a small fish in a very big pond. If I pushed the envelope on that, that's how journalists get disappeared, right? When you have that level of information. So that's, other than that one, there's absolutely nothing that I will hold back from. And like I say, the thing with Substack is it's the only place that I can guarantee you're going to get the email. Rumble withholds notifications to my community all the time. All the time. They'll send out a notification. Oh, What's Up Canada went live 2 hours after the show is over, for example, right? So I've got some issues with Rumble as well. But they like I say, other than that, they've never taken down a live stream. They've taken down that one incriminating video. But Substack to me is the most reliable thing that's out there, but it's just not live.
Oh, what is
That's
the
my
Teamsters?
experience.
What is the Teamsters Union? I'm not going to ask you
That
necessarily to
is
spill the beans, but what is it?
that is the truckers, the dock workers, the railroads,
That's
all
right.
of the things the Hell's Angels own now.
God.
The
It's,
unions are the most complicit entities on our planet.
oh, it's so sad. The corruption of the human systems that were set up with the best motivations to create the best of all possible worlds. And all these systems, every single one we look at that we once trusted, is now corrupt. What does that
They're
point to, Wayne? What does that point to? It's a giant arrow for all of us to say this evil must be shown for what it is. There is massive corruption at the upper levels. I mean, look at Charles. I can't call him Prince or King Charles. He's not my king,
He's not
but
my king. I have one
he
king.
doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't. Yes, well, he doesn't even answer. He's meant to be the defender of the faith, and he doesn't even honor God. He doesn't honor any of us across the Commonwealth, and he certainly doesn't honor the people of the United Kingdom. But all of this corruption points to the fact that the systems must be overthrown. And then what? Long term, what do you predict in the world? Where do you see this going?
Our world as we know it right now is still in its infancy of things, in some capacity. You, me, we, us, all of these former Commonwealth nations, we're still on the asset balance sheet of the crown. Right. And the king, our prime ministers, whether they're caught publicly or not, have all sworn allegiance to the polar opposite of, well, let's just call it for what it is, Moloch. They've sworn allegiance to political Islam. Why? I don't know. Are they that threatened? I don't know. Do they actually believe it? I don't know. But at the end of the day, this is what makes it such a joke to me here in Canada. And it's the same there. Like I said earlier, the red or the blue taxis taking us to the same hell. This is all the illusion that keeps us playing the game that the crown has allowed for hundreds of years. Canada is not a sovereign nation in any legal capacity or function. We are literally just and like I said, an asset of the crown. We're all line items on the balance sheet, and when you become costly, they will find ways to eliminate expenses, shall we say, or promote the good earners, right? So this is where not only has the the alleged king, I'll call him that, because I don't answer to any mortal man, not him or any other. And this is what makes it very frustrating, knowing that until we escape that, there can be no change. There can be no positive change. All we will ever at best receive is an illusion of change, while the the plan continues to march on. And that plan literally goes back to Napoleon and Waterloo, right? When Napoleon lost, he lost because the Rothschilds flipped funding from Napoleon to Wellington, and hence the British Empire began from there, right? And the whole colonizing of the world, the whole Commonwealth was born out of that period in history. So this is depending on what point in history do you want to look at, it's not just the modern wars that were bankers' wars. Every major cultural inflection for the last 300 years is a result of bankers' intervention and wealth preservation among kings and territory and empires. The whole concept of nation states and borders is really only a few hundred years old, right? So in the grand scheme of things, we are all still just living Game of Thrones, and we are, assets in the king's registry.
It's incredible, that whole idea of the Rothschilds having lent the monarchy when it was broke money, and in return getting, I don't know what you'd call it, breeding rights. Getting breeding rights. But I've seen Charles sort of bow his head to a Rothschild. I've seen pictures of that. And the people behind the curtain when you start to use those names, and you look at the Wizard of Oz movie and you want to know who's the Wizard of Oz. Well, you're starting to get close, aren't you, when you start to use those names?
Well, you're getting closer to the there's still a lot deeper players behind those. Those are the low hanging fruit of the faces that have been wearing it for a very long time. At the end of the day, I remember when it was the 1800s. I think shortly after Waterloo, where they created a banking system that has its own sovereign entity, right? It can literally controls the IMF. Even it is accountable to no legislative body or legal entity anywhere on the planet. And where does the bulk of the world's wealth reside? Think about that, right? England isn't the richest country on the planet. Neither is America, for that matter. You got to look to Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates if you want to know who has the most money on the planet. So, who's pulling the strings behind the bankers' wars?
Do you have an answer?
It's the funders of political radical Islam that pull the strings behind the OIC. Even Jeff Bezos donates 3% of every sale on the planet to the Islamic Relief Fund.
Good grief. Where did you find that? That's incredible. Wow.
This is where they all bow to. All of them. All of them. The almighty dollar.
I remember years ago when I lived in Australia, and I was married at that time, and my now ex-husband got a job working for the son of Murdoch. And I remember at the launch party of the son's new business in Sydney, old man Murdoch was there. And I was just struck across the room by the darkness, the black energy around him. It was palpable. And I looked across the room and thought, for all your money, for all those sycophants who are in this room sucking up to you and can't flatter you enough with meaningless flattery, you have nothing. You're just black. Your soul is black. You've paid the ultimate price for a whole lot of what? Money, wealth, stuff, boats, houses, cars, women, none of which you can take with you on your deathbed. You are so poor in terms of your soul. That's what struck me. That's what struck me. It's amazing. And he would be low-hanging fruit. He then answers to the, as you say, to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the people behind them and the people behind them. Or you look at that guy who looks like Mr. Creosote from the Monty Python, just have one more mint, sir, just have one more mint, and then he explodes. Remember that one? The enormous guy. Well, that's the guy who heads the Bank of International Settlements. Every time I see his face, I feel sorry for him and I want to laugh because it's all a giant cosmic joke. It doesn't matter how much you collect of money. You're not a better person unless you live a decent, moral, ethical life. It's so simple at its heart when you do become aware there is a God that's looking down on all of this.
Now we are at the nucleus of it all. The war between good and evil has always existed. Always. When you look through history, though, there is only one faith that has ever refused eternally to submit, and that is the Christians. They will never submit. This is where you get the Charlie Kirks that are such a threat, right? So this is why the eradication of Christianity on the planet is their goal and objective. In Africa, in Syria, right now, there is tens of thousands of Christians being cleansed from the land in Nigeria and in Syria right now, in South Africa, and all of these places. That's who they're waging war against, and this is what it's more complex than just saying Islam. It's not that simple. It is political hostile ideology of the root of Islam is a religion of conquest, not necessarily war, but conquest through peaceful means. If they can get it, they'll give you three choices and you can live, right? You can convert, you can pay the jizya, or you're going to lose your head. Those are, so, they've given you three viable choices, right? But that is where the only, faith system that will never bow to that is the Christian, right? And so when you look at the numbers, people say, oh, well, they hate the Jews the most. No, they don't. The Jews are only one small sliver of what they hate compared to Christians and Hindus and everything else, right? The Christians vastly outnumber the Jews, right? But that's the accepted narrative of the longest. Everybody can justify it away. Oh, Islam is okay, Muslims are okay because they only hate Jews and I'm not Jewish, right? And it's they're peaceful Muslims. No, Muslims in small numbers are always concerned with protecting human rights. Until they are in larger numbers, then there is no human rights. I literally had a man from Lebanon asked me one time, do you know, Wayne, the difference between a moderate Muslim and a radical Muslim? I thought about it for a second. I thought, is this a trick question? Because I don't want to offend you. I don't want, and he saw me struggling with it and he smiled and he says, a radical Muslim wants to take your head. A moderate Muslim will wait and let the radical take your head. Meaning that once they have you outnumbered, you're going to lose your head. But it won't be the moderate that's going to take your head. They just won't resist.
Wow. Say that second line. Say that line again because it just got garbled. Sometimes your words are being run together. It's interference for sure. But just a radical Muslim will take your head. And what's the other
An
line?
Islamist or a radicalist, they want to take your head. If you are there is no tolerance, zero tolerance for anything. If you do not convert, they will take your head. Right? That's the hardcore Islamist. So they want your head, and they're upfront and in your face about it. This is what we're seeing on
And
the river to the
there's
sea.
nothing racist about this. In the Quran, there is an instruction,
Right.
the 1,000-year war.
That is the playbook.
The 1,000-year war. They're told that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the moderate, they don't want to take your head, but they'll wait and let the radical take your head. They won't stand up for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because if they stand up for you, the Christian, then they are standing beside you losing your head. So this is the difference between the jihadis, as I call them, the Islamists, versus the moderates. So to me, this has been the number one act of treason in all of our countries, because they do not understand the difference between the moderate and the radical. Because as soon as the moderates or any of them outnumber the host nation, the moderates will be standing behind the extremists, saying Allah Akbar, right? They're not going to intervene, right? So this this whole bleeding heart Christian apologist thing, because the Christians did in the Crusades, da, 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 da. Well, people don't want to look at their history and realize, why did the Crusades begin? Because basically radical Islam had taken over a good half or almost thirds of the European continent, had to be beaten back into their areas. Was it brutal and savage and horrible and all of those things? Absolutely yes, but people want to pretend like that has changed. It has not changed. Islam has never gone through an evolution or a reformation. They believe exactly the same thing they do now as when they were conquering all of Europe and doing what they do. People, it makes me cringe when people say never again when they refer to the Jewish Holocaust, but yet they will pretend like you didn't say anything when you remind them that 700 million people have been executed or had their lives lost due to political Islam. 6 million, never forget, never again. But 700 million later, we're allowing our countries to be flooded by these people, that have no roots in our countries and our nations. The only reason we survived and were able to create these societies was because of our faith and foundation in the basic Christian values that were so antithetical to, so polar opposite, and we were separated by them. Well, now they're invading us. What chance do we stand here now? I was reading today in Ireland, where natural Irish kids now have to take a lottery in order to determine whether they're allowed in schools or not, because they are so overrun with new migrants that are being given the preference. So first is the migrants get first preference in the schools, and then Ukrainian refugees get second preference in the schools, and you have to enter your child into a lottery if they're an Irish child in your own country. So to me, I see that and I'm like, okay, well, you're 6 months from Sharia.
My own child in his own local school, I was told that there's only so many spaces, and first of all, diversity kids have to be picked, then the Ukrainian children will be picked, and then the local Irish children whose parents were born and reared, and probably their uncles, their brothers, their sisters went to this school, are put into a lottery system for the remaining places.
Do you think this is unfair?
I mean, there could be a gift, a great gift in that. We had the journalist Alex Newman, wonderful man on Freedom Train International. I remember that line where he said, if you have a child in school right now, anywhere in the West, race into the school. Don't go to the school board and complain. Don't waste time. Race into the school and get your child out of school as if the buildings are on fire. He said that's how serious the programming is. That's how seriously your child's mind is being broken down. Homeschool your children. So maybe the Irish children, it's a gift for them. But I am interested in something you said, just in that discussion, you said it's never evolved, even from the Crusades. That religion has never evolved into a more compassionate version, whereas the life of Christ recognizes the very profound evolution of Christianity from, for example, an eye for an eye, to turn the other cheek, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The life of Christ is such a powerful light for us in this darkness, is it not? It's the place I can go to any time when I think, why have I stood up for these 5 years and spoken out when, the other day seeing Bula in the Oval Office, Alfred Bula of Pfizer, being praised by Trump as a good man. The desperation, just in that moment, I went, how can you say that? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., how can you allow such a lie? This man has hurt and maimed and murdered so many. And then you go to a quiet place, an inner place with God, with Jesus, with the knowing that it will, in the end, be good that wins over evil. And I don't know why I know that, Wayne, but I do know it. Do you?
The the king always has one more move. Always. This has been going on this way. I say, this has been going on since the beginning of time. Good versus evil. That battle is never going to end. And so I have an absolute conviction, that God wins at the end of the day. But what we struggle with in our flesh is we want that remedy now. We want him to see and win now. And there ain't, you know, there's no guarantees that we get to see this in our lifetime, right? And this is where the gift from God was the freedom of choice to do the right thing versus what we know to be wrong. And if we succumb to that, well, then it doesn't matter. If we've surrendered that gift, that divinity, then it doesn't matter if he wins next year or 1,000 years from now. That's not going to matter, right? So that's kind of how I see it. I have an absolute conviction and faith, and that's why like I have that that mindset. I'll get up and smile at you and tell you hit me like a girl. Bring it, right? And I've lived that in the flesh myself too. But I know what. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that for that. But
There's
yeah,
a beautiful saying on that. It's knocked down 7 times, get up 8. That's you, Wayne. That's you. But I want to finish with your final, what a wonderful discussion, always is with you. But I want to finish with your piece of soul nurturing advice or inspiration or even just physical prepping advice. What's your final word to the people who've been watching this discussion between us who may feel a little edgy about what could come, but also a shining faith about what will come in the end? The victory will come. But what's your advice now to finish, Wayne?
I think it's pretty apparent to most people that live in the light right now, that there's this great quickening going on. Everything is speeding up. Everything is accelerating. And that's indicative of the fact that we're winning, right? And the dark side never ever reacts in an equal and opposite measure. They always overreact and they knee jerk. And we are seeing such an onslaught of manufactured crisis and division, the victimhood Olympics, the rage baiting, the rage recruiting, all of that hits a new pinnacle every single day. And I want people to think about this for a second. If we were not plugged in to this 24/7, and I'm holding up my phone, my device, my digital device, if we weren't plugged into that, we would not be emotionally controlled by anybody, because that is what they're counting on. When we lose control of our emotions, we are surrendering control of ourselves to whoever is pulling the strings. And they will bombard us with everything that they possibly can in order to get us triggered, to get us to pick a side, get involved in the Rage Olympics or the Victimhood Olympics, whatever it is out there that keeps us fractured and divided. If you find yourself being emotionally led, you are giving away God's gift to you, which is freedom of thought, freedom of discernment, freedom of choice. You're not choosing at that point to not take part. So we are seeing this great quickening of the anger and the rage to try and divide us and to conquer us, because that's what they need to conquer us. They need enough catastrophe that they can accelerate their reset. And the stronger we are as communities, not just as individuals. If you're a strong individual and you got your family looked after, fantastic. Help somebody else do that, right? find not our tribe online, but the tribe in the real world outside of that, because there's going to come a day when the power is going to go out and people aren't going to know what to do. And they're going to be lost because they haven't got their regular attack fix of rage and hate. And people are going to be lost. Live outside of that. And that's where you'll find your people. And yeah, I don't know if that makes an answer or not, but that's what I got in the moment.
It's an amazing answer. There is a big growing school of thought that one of the ways the devil gets into the world is through these devices and too much time on them. So I'm trying to be very selective with who I watch, with what I watch. Yep.
I spent I had an agency where I worked in that field until I realized that we were literally creating Satan's lullaby. Right? It's Satan's candy, and convenience is the drug, and everybody expects now an instant answer, an instant solution, an instant problem solver, an instant hero. And they pick up that device and they look for it and they don't find it and they walk away frustrated and angry, and it makes us susceptible. And the Lord tells us not to live in fear, and that is the fear it generated. It is a fear factory, and our education systems are literally producing child soldiers that live their entire existence in that fear factory called the digital avatar space.
What an extraordinary line. Spend more time looking at the Bible. Spend more time watching Wayne on his website for information that will help you. And I loved a phrase you used way back. I meant to pick it up. You said, the adult in the room. That's where we are now. Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to do it for us. We've got to, well, Gandhi put it well, be the change that you want to see in the world. You want a better world for your child? Then make it a better world for your child and take them back to God and the principles that are way beyond these earthly, ghoulish, evil globalists who are only temporarily maybe winning a little bit, but their wins are so empty. We win in the end, Wayne, don't we?
Absolutely. 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 If you don't see a better life for your child in 5 years than right now, it's time to take responsibility for that, because nobody is coming to take responsibility of it for you.
What a treat it is to talk to you. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Wayne, and good luck in Canada.
Anytime.
We'll keep in touch.
Amen. I will always find a way to keep going.
You will.
I don't, if it wasn't for the Lord, first of all, I wouldn't be here. He's thrown me back twice, telling me you got work to do. So I surrendered, and here I am doing whatever I feel called to do. And I mean, there's been moments when I've wondered, but I've never worried since I surrendered. Honestly,
Wow.
Liz, I've never, ever worried. Not one day.
Wow, that's gorgeous. We watched a movie last night called The Case for Christ, and it's based on a book by a man whose name I can't tell you right now, but he was on Sean Ryan on that podcast. And it's really interesting because he was a journalist, and his wife, I think it was a neighbor originally, but they make the story different in the movie. His wife started to talk about the faith with a neighbor, and then became very much an inward journey of her own, his young wife, and became Christian through that. And he was thrown into, denial and anger and despair and the control thing. I just want my wife back. Whereas he was getting such a richer version of her, such a better version, a more refined version, a more honoring version, but he couldn't see it. And he wrestles in his mind with everything. What he did was he dedicated all his skills as a journalist and his life for a number of years, I think, to finding every single argument against, to absolutely prove to his wife there was no way that the story of Christ was real. And through that journey, every single road, every single piece of evidence, talking to doctors about even the way Christ was brutally treated on his way to the cross and on the cross itself. There is no way that it wasn't a full resurrection because he was fully dead and he was then resurrected, and there were so many accounts of it. So he was led all the time back in this evidentiary way to the fact that Christ was real. And it's just a really lovely, simple little movie.
I
I'm going to
tell
get the book.
people, I know the story. I'm familiar with it, actually. I tell people often that I'm a stubborn child of God. Sometimes I need to be hit with a really big stick before I actually get it, right? So I think that's why he's given me an extra attempt at this thing called life, um, and because I by every accounting of science, I should not exist, literally. Um,
What was that, Wayne? Was
Twice.
it a heart attack? Was it a...
No, when my mother was 7 months pregnant with me, they, in a snowstorm, hit the back end of a semi truck that was stopped. And it, you know, how you hit the back of a truck, it went underneath, crushed my mother, broken collarbones, legs, hips, everything else, 7 months pregnant with me. And they found no heartbeat in the baby. And 9.5 months, or pardon me, 10 and a half, almost 11 months into the pregnancy, there was still no heartbeat. And they were booking mom in to do a C-section to remove the baby from her because they were afraid she was going to go septic, being that far over term, almost 2 full months. I was supposed to be born April 3rd. I was born until May 18th. And when my parents were discussing what do they do with the baby, does it have a soul? Do they bury it? Do they give it a service? I started kicking the shit out of my mother. And
Beautiful.
so that was,
In
and I was
today's
always
world, you would have been aborted. In today's world, they would have
yeah,
rushed you in.
yeah, I would have been removed. Yeah,
My God.
yeah, right. And it wasn't like one doctor, it was every doctor in the hospital examined her and they couldn't figure out, what was going on. There was no heartbeat, there was no sign of life, she didn't put on any extra weight. I just literally went into a coma sleep for 2.5 months. And when I woke up, it was time to get out and get to work. And that's kind of what happened. And so I grew up with a very rich childhood. Not without its challenge. It was very, very difficult childhood. I wouldn't wish it on many others, but later on in my life, I had the opportunity to have a different look back at those things. And in 2014, I ended up at one of the best hospitals in the country in emergency there. And I thought it was rather odd because they raced me through waiting room of 300 people in to see the top doctor in the country. And I was like, okay, well, I feel pretty good. I don't really know what's going on here, but at the end of the day, I had suffered a condition which was massive multiple saddle embolisms, which meant my lungs had stroked out. And the doctor came into my room and he said, "We don't know what to do with you. We have never had somebody arrive to the hospital alive with this condition in the history of knowing this condition." I was the very first one to ever make it to the hospital, and they couldn't figure that out. They didn't know what to do. He said, "I've got an idea. I have no idea. I've heard of this experimental drug treatment, and he at that, I stuck my arm out at him and I said, "What are you waiting for?" He said, "Well, I have to explain to you what the possibilities and things are." I said, "Look, doc, you've already told me I shouldn't be here. I should never have arrived alive. Nobody else has ever arrived alive. And you're telling me I might have a 0.05% chance of getting out of here alive." I said, "The odds are in my favor. All you're doing now is wasting time." 4 days later, I walked out of the hospital, and I shouldn't have been there. And I did a lot of I had some growing to do after that. A lot of rehab. I learned that my brain had been affected by that pretty severely at the time. I had to relearn how to think, things that, because there was a serious deprivation of oxygen through my entire system for 48 hours. I fought it at home for 48 hours before I finally collapsed and ended up in the hospital in the first place. So,
What a soul.
after a
That's
lot
kind
of,
of that's kind of similar to the birthing thing as well, to the being in utero, just
yes.
going still,
So it
going.
was after that and coming out of that, I got hit with the big stick of realization of what government really was, and the difference of faith versus government. There was some pretty serious inflections there. I really struggled. No lie, Liz. I was ready to give up on the world. I could not figure out why I was here. Like, I couldn't figure out, my life was just shit. Why? I mean, the easiest thing in the world would have been for me to die after those embolisms. That would have been the easiest thing. What the fuck was I doing here after that? Simple things for me. I had a photographic memory for numbers. You could show me a phone call card in 6 months for 10 seconds, and 6 months later I'd be able to recite that back to you. And after that, I had a real trouble doing simple things like adding 2 plus 2 plus 2. I literally had to write it on a piece of paper. I had to write sentences. I couldn't articulate language. I really, really struggled with how to communicate, how to think. I had to learn how to do that all over again.
Good grief. How
And
old were you? How old were you at this stage?
that was 2015,
Oh,
10 years ago.
Wayne.
And so I really struggled with that for until 2019, when I went on, and this is where I say I'm a stubborn child of God. I need a big stick to hit me sometimes. For me, that big stick was the first convoy in 2019. Everybody thinks 2022 with the big convoy was it. No, 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 no. That wasn't it at all. That wasn't what changed the game in Canada or the world. The first one happened in 2019. And that was the one that shattered my reality. And after that was over, it was very much shorter. It was only 11 days, but my world had been shattered. My worldview had been absolutely shattered. And I was so overcome in every sense of the word. I crawled into a room in the basement and stayed there for a month. And then there was a moment where I got a random phone call from a lady that I had only met once briefly. I don't remember her name. I don't know how she got my phone number, but she called me and spoke with me for about 20 minutes, and the light in the room I was at changed. Everything about me changed, and I surrendered to doing whatever God would will of me. And from that day forward, like I said, I have never worried. That was the day.
Wayne, that's an extraordinary story.
It was simply as simple as surrendering to God and saying, whatever you'll have of me, I will do it. I will do it. And yeah, that's from there, it's all on my channel.
and
That's
and
why I don't
and
hold
knowing
back.
knowing that he is there. I mean, this is very much the same with the Charlie Kirk story, and so many people, since they murdered the wrong person, that's for sure. Because
Absolutely.
ever since, so many people are looking at Charlie Kirk clips every day. I've talked to heaps of people who've never thought about following Christ and following God, and who are now going, I just love, every day I look for a Charlie Kirk clip, and I listen and I think about what he's saying about God, about Christ. Talk about a way to get Christ's message on
Yeah.
loudspeakers everywhere now.
I talk to people about this, and I want them to hear one message out of this. If you were tangibly, physically affected by the execution of Charlie Kirk, that tells you one thing right there, that you are a part of the body of Christ. That was a serious wound into the body of Christ. That is all of us. And if you want relief and understanding and discernment about why you felt that so strongly, so specifically, because I didn't know the man personally. I'd never met him. I only barely followed him peripherally, unless it was something, profound, that point that he was making. I knew exactly who he was, what he was doing, those things. But I was wrecked. And I couldn't figure that out. And then it was somebody that explained that to me, and it was because you belong to the part, you are a part of the body of Christ, and you were wounded. And if you want to do something about it, go back to God, and you will find the peace that you, and understanding of what's real in this world, the prime reality, not this avatar subjective reality that they want us to live in. The body of Christ lives in the prime reality, not a subjective avatar one.
We might add this at the end of the interview. I mean, it's so beautiful. When you go there, no matter what's going on in the world, everything just goes quiet, peaceful, calm. And I just know that all will be well. All is well and all will be well. And that
You-
nothing they can do can put fear in me. Nothing they can do can hurt me.
Oh, I fear
Nothing.
no mortal man.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We might end up with a Charlie Kirk clip out of this. One quick question before we finish. What was it about the first convoy that changed so much for you as well? What was it about it? Was it?
There's been an east-west divide created in Canada for decades and decades and decades. For me, I came by it honestly. I was a kid playing junior hockey when Pierre Elliott Trudeau implemented what they called equalization bill, which robbed Alberta's prosperity to give it all to Quebec and Ontario. And my family went from me to be able to play sports of any kind, go to school, have clothes, any of those things. That was gone. I had to go to work at 13 to support my family because there was no income available for our family. There was no social programs at that time. So it was a real easy thing for the East to hate the West in Canada. Everybody, that's most people are familiar with that East versus West thing in Canada, not even left versus right, but it's East versus West. And that's been going on a very long time.
The
And
Marxists always find a way to create hate and division between people.
Yep.
They always do that.
And that was the first full-on major communist policy that was implemented in Canada. They literally robbed the West in order to give it to the East. And so in 2019, what drew me into politics and activism, because I'd never had any part of that, I was the 100 hours a week workaholic. That was my thing. And I'd never been involved in politics in any capacity. My opinion, what it was, well, if that's what Canada wants, that's what I'll live with, right? But then I found out about the Migration Compact and the Paris agreements. And I started to look into that. And then I attended a protest and a rally. It was December 5th of 2018 that I attended my very first political rally of my life. And something was off. And so I turned my camera on and I filmed it. I had all kinds of this experience from doing all of this. I was a PR guru for all kinds of different Palm Beach psychoanalyst, New York concierge travel agent. That's what I was doing in 2018, 2019. I had the laptop lifestyle where I was living on warm, sunny beaches, working on my laptop, pretending to be this psychoanalyst or this, concierge, da 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 da. And I saw what was going on, and this convoy was being organized to go from the west to the east to protest the government for two reasons: the the Migration Compact and the No More Pipelines law. And I thought, okay, you guys go ahead, do your thing, and I'll go back to doing my thing. Well, I got badgered by some beautiful ladies literally until like 4 o'clock in the morning, the day the bus left to go. And finally, I relented and said, okay, I will go and I will document this convoy for everybody to see what's happening. And along that journey, and it was bitterly cold, like there wasn't a day where it got warmer than minus 45 Celsius. And about 300 of us, 300 people headed east, and it's a 4,000 kilometer drive one way, right? And every day, the further east we got, the more people would be standing in the roads and the turnouts and the intersections. And by the time we were halfway through, there wasn't an intersection or a road where there wasn't people. And there were people that didn't have anything to give Liz at all. And they had driven 6 hours one way, waited 5 hours in the cold for us to come by just so that they could wave to us and show their support and then drive home, or to bring us sandwiches, homemade sandwiches and stuff like that. They didn't have any money to give, but they would bring food, they would bring coffee. And there was one stop where there was, we were late getting there. We didn't arrive till like 10:30 at night. It's 45 below. There's 5,000 people in a parking lot waiting for us just to show us support. And I remember getting off of the bus and just in awe. It was in Sault Ste. Marie, and there was a lady. She turned around, she looked at me. Never seen her before in my life. We locked eyes and both just started sobbing. And she walked over and gave me the biggest hug I've ever had in my freaking life. And that was where I realized at that point in time that every single metric of human suffering is coming from the same damn places. We're all suffering and they are dividing us in every capacity, not just from each other, but from our own humanity. And when that 11-day journey was over, I couldn't go back to my business. I couldn't. I couldn't go and be a part of the system that I knew was facilitating the wrong. I was a beta tester and developer. Really, I had it made. And I fired all of my fucking clients, every last one of them. I didn't even send a notice to my company. I just shut it down and I walked away from it all. And then it was April 5th when I turned the computer on to a big hearing here in Canada. And without even thinking of it, I turned the computer on to do a live stream. This was a month post the convoy. And there was, once the convoy was over, nobody knew what to do with themselves, right? There was such an adrenaline dump from all of these people, and it was such an event. There was 300 of us went, but for something like 78 hours, our hashtag was the number one hashtag on the planet. The whole planet was watching what was going on in Canada. Canadians weren't seeing it, but the whole planet was. And I remember being on Parliament Hill with 80,000 people on one of my live streams. 80,000 people tuned in on my live stream, and the governments cut the feeds. And every time the governments would cut the feeds, somebody else would fire it up, use that hashtag, and the world was seeing it anyway. And I knew that I had been a part of something profound. That whole trip, I did nothing but teach everybody in that convoy how to leverage social media. That was my business. And then when I got back, I fired all of my clients, shut down my company, and I turned on a live stream and I said, "What's up, Canada?" And I knew in that moment what my calling was to be. And that was where my platform was born.
That's just so inspiring. I'm going to add this
That's where it
after conversation at the end of the interview, because who knows, there might be 10, there might be 100, there might be 1,000, there might be one. Who knows how many people will be inspired by even just that part of our talk. God, Wayne, that's incredible.
I will never know how many people I've touched or made an impact on. But if anybody needs an affirmation that one person can make a difference, it doesn't have to be me. Look at what Charlie Kirk did. That was one man. He impacted an entire planet. I may have been fortunate enough to, impact some podcasters or, some folks to, to find answers that they couldn't find elsewhere. But yeah, never forget the power of one. It is far mightier, and we have no idea. And inspiration and courage inspires and begets more inspiration and courage. So, yeah.
Wayne, you're a beautiful soul. I'm honored to know you. I'm honored that you're my friend.
I'm just a stubborn northern swamp donkey, Liz.
In a good hat. In a good hat.
With a great hat.
We'll talk again soon, my friend. Thank you, Wayne.
Absolutely.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, my pleasure.